Well, good afternoon. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We're right at 1:30. This is Emily Lindley. I'm just going to say a brief welcome and then kick it over to the folks in our Office of Water to go through the agenda today. I want to thank Lori Fleet and Rob, who set up this phone call and stakeholder meeting today. It's, everything's new and different in this COVID world, but we're adjusting and adapting best we can, and I hope it's worked out for everyone today. And I appreciate everyone's flexibility and participation in how we plan to operate today's meeting. I will just report out real quick and say that things are going well. I also want to thank EPA Region 6. They have been wonderful to work with and wonderful partner. I do think Charles McGuire is on the phone call today listening in. I'm not sure what other Region 6 folks might be listening in, but a special thank you to him and Regional Administrator McQueen and Renee Ryland, all up at EPA Region 6, for working with us diligently to get this up to them and to get our questions answered and to be a good partner for us to work with. Probably the biggest announcement I'll make today is that we do anticipate getting our package up to EPA way ahead of schedule. As you all know, we're required by statute to submit it by next September 2021. At the path and the rate we're going at right now, we are looking to get it there probably this September, October. And so things are moving quickly, but that's what the timetable kind of looks like at this point, that we would have our package up to them, a complete package up to them by September, October, so just a handful of months away. I think that's really all I'm going to say in the welcoming part, and I will let, I believe, Lori, or maybe L'Oreal will take over next and go through our agenda, but appreciate all those that are participating today. So I will be in listen-only mode now. Thanks, ladies.
Hi, this is L'Oreal Stepney. Thank you, Commissioner. I wanted to say a special thank you to EPA as well as the different offices in the agency for working so diligently on this, the Office of Water, Office of Compliance and Enforcement, Office of Legal Services, and others, as well as our state partners, the Attorney General's office, as well as the Railroad Commission. We just really appreciate everyone's partnership. And with that, I will ask Lori Fleet and David Galindo to take it from there. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I'll take this off in case anyone needs to see better. So again, I'm Lori Fleet in the Wastewater Permitting Division, and I'm going to talk about the oil and gas effluent limitation guidelines. But before I do, and before we get into our agenda, at the top of the draft agenda, it has a little statement about how the public can participate in this stakeholder meeting. So right now, the Tcq offices are closed to the public. So in the agenda room here are really just the speakers and folks assisting with the webcast. And so to participate in this meeting, you obviously are watching through the webcast. And during the course of our discussions, feel free to submit any comments or questions that you have to our outreach email. And then those comments and questions will be addressed at the end of the meeting. There's a question and answer session at the end. So throughout the meeting, just type in your questions or your comments, and we'll cover those at the end of the meeting. The email address is outreach@tceq.texas.gov. Again, that's outreach@tceq.texas.gov. So with that, I'll get into the first topic, which is the oil and gas effluent limitation guidelines. So we had to do a rulemaking to adopt EPA's oil and gas point source effluent limitation guidelines. And so that rulemaking was one of several steps necessary to implement House Bill 2771 from the 86th legislative session. As you may know, the bill requires TCEQ to submit a request to EPA for authority to issue federal permits for discharges of produced water, hydrostatic test water, and gas plant effluent into water in the state from certain oil and gas activities. The rule amended Section 305.541 to adopt EPA's effluent limitation guidelines for the oil and gas point source category and the centralized waste treatment category, which are found in 40 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 435 and 437. Additionally, the rule defines the term produced water, which is used in House Bill 2771. The rule was published in the Texas Register on January 10th, 2020, and a public hearing was held on February 4th, 2020. The comment period closed on February 11th, 2020, and public comments were received and responses were developed. The Commission adopted the revisions to Section 305.541 on May 20th, 2020. So that rulemaking is now complete. So that's one of our steps to adopt those effluent limitations in order to implement House Bill 2771. So with that, I'll turn it over to David. He's going to give an update on the hydrostatic test general permit amendment.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I was going to give a quick update on our renewal of the hydrostatic, actually amendment without renewal of the hydrostatic general permit. Currently, Tcq has a general permit. It's TXG 67, which authorizes the discharge of hydrostatic test water from vessels or pipes that are associated with refined product. And so what we're doing, or what we've done, is we've amended that permit to now include vessels that previously contained natural gas or are associated with natural gas or crude. And so since this is an amendment without renewal, the changes are to just add new conditions and new authorizations for those additional wastes. And existing permittees will not be required to resubmit or reapply. So they're not required to submit an NOI if they're currently covered under the general permit. Additionally, land application of hydrostatic test water from crude or associated with crude or natural gas will continue to be covered by the Railroad Commission. And so we've gone through the process of amending the general permit, and we've submitted the general permit to EPA with the following changes. So we've added some new prohibitions to the permit, which include a prohibition on the discharge of PCBs, permittees that for natural gas lines, when they submit the notice of intent, they will be required to certify that that the pipe was not used to or have any PCBs associated with that. Additionally, there is a prohibition of the use of any chemicals other than dyes or chlorine. And then there's an additional prohibition to ensure that any rinse water or water used to clean those vessels is not authorized for discharge. So it's clearly prohibited within the draft general permit. We've also added additional requirements to the permit, such as clarifying that our minimum analytical levels are required to be met for any lab analysis that's conducted for BTEX, total lead, so for the parameters under the permit. And of course, under the TPDS requirements, any testing that's done has to meet the requirements of 40 CFR Part 136, which are the EPA-approved test methods. Additionally, we'll be requiring electronic submittal of the notice of intent or any of the application forms, as well as the discharge monitoring reports. Will also be submitted electronically to the agency. We've also got a clarifying that no welding scrap or solids shall be authorized for discharge. And so that's an additional requirement. So all these requirements are to ensure that the discharges remain protective of water quality. So in addition to that, there are some minor changes, just some definitions, language changes, and those are not not significant. And so you'll be able to review and comment on the general permit. We've like I mentioned before, we sent this up with these changes to EPA. EPA has approved the general permit, and so now we're going to go to publish in the Texas Register, and that'll most likely occur the first week of July. And so please look out for that in the Register. And so our goal here is to have everything in place approved for this general permit so that when we do receive delegation, we will be able to put the permit in place and there not be any lapse in coverage for any folks that are currently discharging under an authorization issued by the Railroad Commission, issued by EPA for discharge. And so if you have any questions at the end, we'll take questions on this. But now I'll turn it over back to back to Lori with the weather. Thank you.
All right, I don't have a weather update except for it's hot out there. Kathy Humphreys was not able to join us today, so I will give a brief update on the Tcq Railroad Commission Memorandum of Understanding. So that was a rulemaking to repeal 30 Texas Administrative Code Section 7.117, which adopts by reference the Memorandum of Understanding between the Railroad Commission and the TCEQ. That is found at 16 TAC Section 3.30, which is the Railroad Commission regs. And then that rulemaking also simultaneously adopted the full text of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Railroad Commission and the TCEQ under a new section 7.117. So the old 7.117 was repealed and replaced with the full version of the Memorandum of Understanding. The changes in the rule related to the transfer of responsibility for certain oil and gas discharges from the Railroad Commission to TCEQ and the dual authorization of Class 2 and Class 5 injection wells. TCEQ's proposed rules were published on February 28th, 2020, and the public comment period closed on March 30th, 2020. Public comments were received and responses were developed. The Commission adopted the revisions to 7.117 on June 10th, 2020. The Railroad Commission's rulemaking was published on February 11th, 2020, and the Railroad Commission is scheduled to consider adoption of those amendments at its open meeting on June 16th, 2020. So that's the update that I have on the TCEQ Railroad Commission MOU. And so with that, I will go right into the next topic, which is our NPDES delegation application and EPA TCEQ Memorandum of Understanding or Memorandum of Agreement. So as far as the NPDES application for Oil and Gas Permitting Authority and Compliance and Enforcement Authority, we are now starting our internal reviews of that application. After our internal reviews and those documents are finalized, we will be submitting it to the Office of the Attorney General, who is required to develop a statement of legal authority in accordance with 40 CFR Part 123. After the Attorney General develops the statement of legal authority, it will go to the Governor's Office to submit it to EPA, and as Commissioner Lindley mentioned, we are planning to submit it to EPA in September, October of this fall. Regarding the Memorandum of Agreement between TCEQ and EPA, the Memorandum of Agreement was developed back in 1998, and there were a number of things that were outdated in that document. As you can imagine, even the name of our agency changed from the Texas Natural Resource Conservation Commission to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. So what we did is we revised that 1998 Memorandum of Agreement to bring it up to 2020, just non-substantive type changes, and that document was finalized and signed by EPA on June 12, 2020. So that, again, we made non-substantive changes to bring the 1998 Memorandum of Agreement up to current, just current things such as our agency name and other non-substantive changes. And so what we're going to do is, with our NPDES application for oil and gas, we're going to develop a Memorandum of Agreement addendum. So it'll be a standalone document that establishes the oil and gas, the changes that are necessary to accommodate the oil and gas discharges. So with that, I'll turn it back over to David. Maybe he has more on the weather for our announcements.
Thank you, Lori. Our announcement, we only have one announcement, and that is that our next stakeholder meeting is going to be held September 17th, 9:30. And so it'll be here in the agenda room at Tceq, that's Building E, room 201S. And we will provide an update when we send out the notice for the application on what the current status is going to be as far as the public attending the meeting. And so with that, we'll move on to any questions on any of the previous topics that we've covered. Lori?
I'll just make one last reminder that if you do have comments or questions about any of the topics we've discussed today, or anything else that you may have comments or questions on related to oil and gas, delegation and House Bill 2771, send those now at outreach@tceq.texas.gov. And I'll just mention that we do have about a 10 to 15 second delay between me speaking now and when you actually hear it. And so as we go through the questions and answers, if you hear a pause, it's because we're waiting for additional questions or comments to come in. So don't be alarmed if there's a little bit of a pause between the comments and questions. We just want to give everyone a chance to finish typing their questions before we close the meeting. So with that, Ms. Carissa, are there any questions or comments?
None so far.
Okay. So with that, I guess we will pause and give everyone a chance for any final thoughts, any questions that maybe come to mind. So we'll have a brief pause.
Okay, Lori, I've got one from Miss Jill. I don't know what her last name is, I'm sorry. Okay. Her question is the new NPDES MOA with TCEQ and EPA available on our TCEQ website? And if not, will it be available sometime in the near future?
So it is not available currently. We just got it from EPA at the end of last week. It will be posted online and available to the public. So we'll get that taken care of shortly. Any other comments or questions coming in?
I'm not receiving anything so far.
Okay, we'll pause a few more minutes, or not minutes, but at least another, say, 30 seconds to give folks time to type their comments or questions. Again, that's outreach@tceq.texas.gov. Texas is all spelled out, Texas.
Okay, I received one from an Ann Rogers. She says that how has the enforcement process proceeded? I seem to recall there was discussion on who the permitted entity would be, such as the drilling company, landowner, etc.
So the owner operator is the permittee, and so we are not from the way EPA is currently permitting these oil and gas facilities. Whomever is the permittee with EPA would be the permittee with us, because we have to comply with the federal regs. It is the owner or the operator, so that would be the permittee. We would be following the EPA regs. So if the Railroad Commission has maybe a different permittee, we would have to marry those up between the Railroad Commission permit and the EPA permit to follow EPA regulations on who the permittee is. All right, so with that, I believe we have no additional comments or questions. Reminder note here, for those who are watching on the website, can y'all please send in an email to the outreach@tcq.texas.gov. Let us know your name and your affiliation so we can note you as being in attendance for the webcast. That'd be greatly appreciated. Oh, wait. We have another comment or question?
One last question. I've got a Julie Nargran. I apologize if I misspell or mispronounce your name. Do you know if TCEQ is taking any current permits from RRC/EPA after seeking and receiving delegation? If so, how many?
So once we obtain delegation from EPA, the EPA permits will transfer, the jurisdiction for them will transfer in accordance with the Memorandum of Agreement, addendum, Memorandum of Agreement addendum between Tcq and EPA. Again, that document is being finalized now. It lays out how that transition is going to occur. The Memorandum of Understanding between the Tceq and the Railroad Commission, which was the 30 Texas Administrative Code Section 7.117 that I mentioned, was recently adopted. That lays out how the transfer of jurisdiction will occur between the Railroad Commission permits and Tceq. So there's two documents that lay out how that transition is going to occur, one between Tceq and EPA and the other between Tceq and the Railroad Commission. With that said, we do have, as far as the number of permits that will be transferring, we don't have a real firm number at this point from the two agencies. Railroad Commission's permits, if I recall correctly, are either 60-day or 90-day permits, and so their permits are constantly in flux, and how many they have is going to be varied over time. EPA, I believe we were in like the 50, 55 permit range, the last I knew. So that's about the number of permits that we're expecting from EPA. And again, we would have to do a final check with Railroad Commission as we get delegation and that transition starts. So again, I'll pause for any other questions or comments. With that, don't see that we have any additional comments or questions, so we will close our stakeholder meeting. Again, one last reminder to send in your name and your affiliation to outreach@tcq.texas.gov so we can note you as being in attendance for the webcast. And so with that, thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see y'all in September.